Hello, this is your captain speaking, and welcome to your tour of the Milky Way. On this trip across the stars, we will be visiting solar systems in every stage of life and learning about their differences and similarities. So buckle up, keep your head, hands, and feet inside the ride at all times, and please, try to refrain from upchucking your lunch or getting lost in cosmic horror. Let us begin. First, we will be traveling 7,000 light-years away to the Eagle Nebula, known for its towering formations, the Pillars of Creation. The Eagle Nebula, like all nebulae, is a massive birthing ground for stars, where gas and dust from the nebula clump together through the process of accretion to form new stars. And what a better example of one of these baby stars than Karma 7, a protostar roughly 1,400 light-years away from Earth. Protostars are the precursors of all stars, relatively small balls of gas, similar in appearance to stars, but lacking the mass necessary to create their own energy, and thus emit light. Just like human infants, these stars are prone to outbursts, although in this case, it's not a change in temperament, but rather periods of sudden and violent activity as the main sequence star is formed. As the young star matures, they form what is called a protoplanetary disk, such as HL Tauri, 450 light-years away from our blue planet. As it reaches maturity, a protostar will release a portion of its mass into the area around it, forming a ring. This ring will later go through the same process of accretion to create planets and moons surrounding the young star, making up its personal solar system as it reaches the main sequence phase. Not all protostars make it to the main sequence, however. Very rarely, a protostar will not be able to reach the mass necessary for it to sustain nuclear fusion, creating a brown dwarf such as Lumen 16, a rough 6.5 light-years away from the Earth. Brown dwarfs are something of the failed stars of the galaxy, being small, typically no larger than Jupiter, dim, and remarkably cool, their surface temperature never exceeding 1,000 degrees Kelvin, while the coolest can be no less than 600 degrees, roughly the same temperature as the human body. For the majority of stars, however, failing to reach the main sequence is not a concern. The majority of the stars in the galaxy, like Alpha Centauri A, a mere 4.37 light-years away from our home planet, are main sequence stars. The main sequence is not actually any particular type of star, but instead a general name given to common forms a star takes throughout the majority of its life cycle, including red dwarf, giant, and supergiant stars. Just like how organisms need food and water to survive, main sequence stars run on nuclear fusion, the process by which extreme heat and pressure within the stars causes the nuclei of atoms to merge, producing energy and light as a byproduct. For this reason, a smaller main sequence star will burn dimmer but for longer, while the much larger giants and supergiants will burn brighter, but will not last nearly as long. While we're in the neighborhood of Alpha Centauri A, we might as well visit its cousin, Proxima Centauri, a red dwarf and the closest star to our solar system other than the Sun itself, only 4.2 light-years away. Despite this distance being relatively short in terms of cosmological measurements, it would still take the Juno spacecraft, the fastest and most reliable man-made object in space, 17,160 years to get to it. Small and relatively cool, red dwarfs are by far the most common stars in our galaxy, making up at least 3/4 of the total star population. Because red dwarfs are typically only 10% of the mass of the Sun, they are rather dim in the night sky. However, the silver lining of this attribute is that it makes it easier for scientists to observe the planets surrounding these stars, giving us a sort of look into the past, as these stars have the longest lifespans of any main sequence stars, many being nearly as old as the universe itself. Moving on to the next size class of star, we will take a look somewhere more familiar. Yellow dwarfs, such as the Sun, have a somewhat misleading name. Despite being classified as dwarves, they are actually middle-sized stars, burning fuel at a moderate pace, shining brighter than red dwarfs, but dimmer than the red giants. Oftentimes, the Sun can help us to put into perspective just how vast the universe is. Even as the closest star to our planet, it still takes some 8 minutes and 20 seconds for light from the Sun to reach Earth. Stephenson 218, a red supergiant 18,900 light-years from Earth, is the largest star in the known universe, with a radius 2,150 times that of the Sun. These behemoth stars live fast and die hard, burning their huge supplies of material at ludicrous speeds, releasing metric truckloads of energy every passing second, finally collapsing when they run out of fuel to burn into some of the most powerful yet fascinating objects in the universe. But more on that later. As you would likely expect, these stars are not only massive and bright, but also extremely hot, Stephenson 218 itself being about 3,200 degrees Kelvin. Near the ends of their lives, some stars become Cepheid variable stars, such as RS Puppis, which lies some 5,600 light-years away. Cepheid variable stars are unique because they have a very special trait. They pulse, becoming brighter and dimmer over time. The cause of this pulsation is the presence of ionized helium in the atmospheres of these stars. At cooler temperatures, the helium is opaque, absorbing light from the star itself. However, as the helium collects more energy, it gets hotter, causing it to expand and become more transparent, eventually reaching the point that it barely traps any more heat, and starts to condense again, becoming more opaque and restarting the process. However, no star can last forever, and all will inevitably die. For the majority of stars, they will shed their outer layers, forming a planetary nebula, such as the Eskimo Nebula, a rough 6,520 light-years away. A planetary nebula is similar to a protoplanetary disk, but the main difference is that because planetary nebulae form at the end of a star's life when they are producing large quantities of heat and starting to collapse in on themselves, they are much hotter than protoplanetary disks, typically in the range of 10,000 degrees Kelvin, hot enough to cook any planets within them alive. Thankfully, these nebulae don't last very long, typically having fully dissipated around 10,000 years after first being formed. Even after the protoplanetary nebula has disappeared, however, the leftover core of the star still remains. This remnant is known as a white dwarf, and is incredibly small, only slightly larger than the Earth, but also incredibly dense, containing roughly as much mass as the Sun. One such star is Sirius B, the sibling star of Sirius A, which is the brightest star in the night sky, and roughly 8.5 light-years away from Earth. What causes these stars to become so densely packed? After using up all their fuel, the star can no longer rely on nuclear fusion for energy, and so it sheds its outer layers and starts compressing the electrons of its inner core together to enter electron degeneracy, producing energy by compressing electrons together. Not all stars become white dwarfs, however. Merely 2% of all stars will have enough mass to become either a neutron star or a black hole. Neutron stars, like Calvera, located 6,500 light-years from the Earth, and named after the antagonist of the 1960 Western film The Magnificent Seven, can be thought of as the big brothers of white dwarfs and the more vibrant cousins of black holes. Similar to white dwarfs, they are created from condensation of subatomic particles. However, whereas white dwarfs are created from the gathering of electrons, neutron stars are made up almost exclusively of, as the name suggests, neutrons. This massive collection of neutrons is created at the end of a high-mass star's life as it condenses all of its mass into its core. The pressure of this condensement is so extreme that it causes protons and electrons to fuse with each other, creating new neutrons, which all gather alongside the pre-existing neutrons in the center of the star before whatever is left is eventually ejaculated out into space in a fabulous supernova. Also alike to white dwarfs, these formations are very dense, generally in the ballpark of 10 kilometers across, but with a mass 100 times that of the Sun. There is also a sort of Cepheid variable star equivalent among neutron stars. Because neutron stars do not lose their angular momentum as they transform, if one is spinning fast enough, it may become a pulsar. A pulsar, like the 6,500 light-year away Crab pulsar, is a neutron star that spins so rapidly on its axis that its magnetic field shoots out a rotating beam of radiation, which gives off a pulsing effect as it spins around the neutron star, earning them their name. These pulsations are remarkably uniform, more accurate than an atomic clock, and thus are a useful tool for scientists. Unfortunately, like the stars that came before them, pulsars do not last forever, and will eventually slow down and become regular old neutron stars. Not that neutron stars aren't cool too. Finally, the last possible stage of a star's life cycle and most powerful object in the universe, the black hole. Black holes are created when a star grows so large that it cannot sustain its own weight any longer, causing it to implode with a force so great that it deforms space-time in its wake. Anything that enters the unrelenting grasp of a black hole, be it solid, liquid, gas, or even light, will be sucked into the event horizon, never to escape. Despite how terrifying this may seem, black holes are also a good thing. It is the supermassive black hole Sagittarius A, 26,672 light-years away, at the center of the Sagittarius constellation that keeps the Milky Way galaxy together. In fact, it is believed that, much like how all moons orbit planets and all planets orbit stars, that all galaxies are formed with a supermassive black hole in the center. Alright, well, I think I've had enough existential dread for one day, don't you? Time to go back to Earth. Please remain in your seat until the ride comes to a complete halt. Thank you for visiting, and please come again.